Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such an amazing place to live, work, and play. I have a great show today, but before we get to our guests, I want to share with you a quote that I've actually just ran across it in one of my newsletters this morning, but it's from Tina Fey. And I thought that's pretty, Tina Fey, the comedian, she said this: say yes, and you'll figure it out later. Figure it out later. There's a lot of times during my career that I said yes to something, knowing that there was a lot of ambiguity and I had a lot to learn fast. But sometimes, the power, the ability to deal with ambiguity, some people want to know all there is to know about everything before they can make a decision. But most situations aren't like that. There's going to be things you're not going to be sure about. And one of the ways to get ahead in your career, sometimes you have to be willing to say yes and have a little bit of confidence in the skill sets that you bring to the table, and know that you'll figure it out if you're a resourceful person. And a lot of our guests share that quality. They bite off big chunks, whether entrepreneurially in their corporation, maybe the work that they do in the community. They bite off a lot of chunks, as I say often, to do their reps, whether it's in the community or in their professional life. And then they go figure it out. So Tina's right. Tina Fey is right. Say yes, and you'll figure it out later. Okay, so let's move on. I want to invite my friend Kevin Felsher into the conversation. He's with the House of Representatives from District 117, which actually happens to be my district where I live in Biloxi. And we're just going to chat and catch up about what he's up to when he's not in the legislature. Maybe we'll look back a little bit on the legislature, but before we go any further, Kevin, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fine, Ricky, and thank you for having me on Coast Vue. It's an honor to be with you.
It's great to see you. Hey, so where are you sitting right now?
I'm at my home office.
Your home office, and we'll talk about you. You've been in the real estate business for quite a number of years, and my mother was a real estate broker. My dad was a home builder. He unfortunately died back in 1979. I was 21, but he was a home builder. And so my whole life, I've been around real estate. I actually got my real estate license at one time and actually had a thought that maybe I'd go into the real estate business or the construction business. But my dad died in 1979. If you remember, or you may not even been born yet, but it was, the interest rates were 20%, and things happened the way they happened. I went back to school. I was in pre-med at the time, incidentally, and went back to school, went on to get my MBA. But I've always had a really good understanding about real estate, and when you're in the real estate business, you learn a lot about what it means, what it takes to build value in a community. And at the core, you really do learn a lot about value and what that stands for in a community, don't you?
You do. You help people, whether it's finding a home. In my case, I do primarily commercial. It's relocating a business or helping a business owner find a location for their business, and therefore helping the community have somewhere that they like to go and spend their money. Senator Delano and I went and spoke to Biloxi Junior High last week, and they wanted to talk way more about real estate than they did politics.
Isn't that interesting?
Interested in when a Chick-fil-A may come closer to them or a Starbucks may come closer to them than they wanted to hear about, what's going on in the legislature. So for better or for worse, I agree with you.
Well, Kevin, you know this well. In my conversations with Fofo or Kenny Holloway over in Ocean Springs, or with Tish Williams and various others who have invested significant millions of dollars in places like Bay St. Louis, and then thinking about the kind of development that's happening in Pascagoula, looking at Nico Restaurant Group and seeing what Jordan Nico and his brother and others are doing to expand, and Joe Cloyd and the work that they're doing. I mean, I could just go on and keep listing name after name after name after name. What's happening is that you're beginning to see a revitalization of the whole notion of creating walkable communities. I mean, Gulfport's, on the brink of some extraordinary things. In Biloxi, I don't even think there's any commercial real estate available downtown now. There may be one or two parcels, but we're in the midst of a boom in coastal Mississippi right now, aren't we?
We are. I have a friend of mine, and two friends actually that are going to open a brewery, but it has taken them months to find a location to put their brewery at. And, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because we have some folks wanting to come in our downtown area and get moving on some business ventures, but the real estate is few and far between on what's available. And what is available, sometimes the prices are a little bit unrealistic because of the scarcity of it. So you've got to be able to make your numbers work on the ROI. So these challenges, but again, good challenges that we have, I think.
My son, you actually may know my son, Jordan Mathews. He's with Schwartz and Orgler, and yeah. So, but he does. He works with Robert a couple of days a week, and then he does the transactional closings and that stuff on 3 days a week. But he's really enjoyed it. But you get a good sense of the amount of activity that's happening in coastal Mississippi, and then of course, I have a number of people. One from L.A. Josh Morgan, the top hurricane chaser in the world, has been looking for a house in Bay St. Louis. He has a place in Los Angeles, and he wants a second home where he can base during hurricane season. Been leasing a home here the last couple of years, but he doesn't blink at the price per square foot, even though it's extraordinary for us because of what they pay in LA. But he couldn't find a place in Bay St. Louis. He literally couldn't find a place in Bay St. Louis, so he ended up buying some land, and he's going to build in Old Town. But it's the real estate market in coastal Mississippi, in spite of all the challenges around the country, it's really doing well, isn't it?
It is. I think we're finally getting some insurance carriers in here that'll write and write for a rate that is doable for investors and even some folks who want to build on the beach out of that velocity zone. So this is helping out tremendously. I hope that we can keep interest rates down. That's been real favorable for acting as a catalyst for people to still come in and invest. And of course, just the general leadership I think we have in our municipalities with Mayor Gillage and Mayor Hughes with a welcoming arm to people. Hey, we want your business. This has been very helpful too.
No, I agree. I say it all the time. What's interesting about the collection of mayors we have across really just about all of the coast cities now is that they sort of went off and made their their situation. Now, Billy's been in politics for a long time, but during that time, he continued to build his business. So he's got a good business mind. And, Fofo made his money doing something else in computer science and whatever, and came to the city, and Kenny Holloway fits that same description. And, you go to Mayor Pascagoula, Mayor Moss Point. I mean, the truth is they all kind of made their living doing something else. They didn't look to, when they became mayors, they didn't see that as a promotion in life. In a lot of ways, they're just kind of trying to give back to the community. That certainly defines them, I think, really well. But we're lucky, man. We got a collection of mayors right now that they get it. Certainly they're competitive with one another. That is for sure. But they're also incredibly aware that when they work together on common issues, coastal Mississippi is going to be stronger because of it, and they get it. The notion of one coast. When I became publisher of the Sun Herald, I pushed really hard for what we call the South Mississippi Strategy, working really, really hard. I mean, for years, and this history really well. Jackson never really had to pay much attention to coastal Mississippi because we were so busy fighting amongst ourselves.
Right.
And once we started getting our act together, certainly that began to happen before Katrina. But after Katrina, there was a clarion call that we had to work together. We had to find ways to find our common issues and work, build the coast in a positive way going forward. And we've made a lot more strides in that regard. I mean, you don't hear them talking in Jackson too many times these days about the coast fighting amongst themselves so that Jackson doesn't have to pay attention, do you?
I don't. As a matter of fact, in the eyes of most of my colleagues, the coastal delegation is a venerable delegation to deal with, and not in a negative way, but just in the way that we do work in a harmonious fashion at the Capitol. And I really feel blessed to work among most of my colleagues here in the coastal delegation. I really do.
Yeah, I'm pleased with where the coastal delegation is. You can always get better. You can always get more aligned. But the nature of it, different personalities, people have different agendas. It's hard to bring the entire delegation together into one mode of thinking. If you were able to do that, then it wouldn't be a democracy. The truth is they're representing, that I was saying the House of Representatives where the rubber really hits the road, because people, you can literally go knock, Kevin, can't you, on every door in your district if you chose to do that. And some are just not able to do that. And that gives you some insights about your district that may make it difficult for you to join in on everything in some harmonious way. That's just the reality. But if you can get there on 80% of the issues, you've made some great strides, haven't you?
You have, and just in general, I think there's a misconception about the Capitol and the way we vote. I would speculate that on 85 to 90% of all issues, we work well with everyone, the Democrats and Republicans. We respect each other. We go out to dinner. We talk through things. If there's a problem, it's handled, in a respectful fashion, and we talk. And of course, the same is true on the coastal delegation part. For the most part, we have a harmonious relationship and try to help each other where we can. If I represent Biloxi and someone represents Pascagoula, in those two cities, there's a competing project. Of course, you want the best project, and if they're both tied, well, I'm going to compete for mine, and that other representative or senator will compete for theirs. But at the end of the day, it's good for the coast, is what we hope.
You had to. I mean, we're the economic engine that drives the state, and we can never let anyone forget that. I mean, and one of the things that Jerry St. Pé said, that we can't be complacent. His biggest fear is that we will get complacent. That Ingalls is always going to be there. Chevron's always going to be there. The blue chip industries over in Stennis are always going to be there. The gaming industry is always going to be here. And John Hairston points out that since the early 1990s, when gaming came, that was a game-changing sort of added dimension to our coast economy. There hasn't been a game-changing, thing like that since then. So we got to be focused on figuring out where's the innovation, where's the opportunity. The new economy certainly presents some new opportunities. When we come back, we can continue the conversation with Representative Kevin Felsher. I want to know a little bit more about his, where he came from. He's a Southern Miss graduate and other things like that. We'll see after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. One thing about Coast Vue is this: I don't engage in politics too often. I have considered. I've had some concerns about the current U.S. congressional race down here, and I'm going to see how the most the primary sort of shakes out, and may weigh in a bit on that particular race, and I'll share my concerns at some point. But I didn't want to do it until we got into to a runoff scenario, and then we can have a conversation about it. But typically, not about politics at all. It will be politics as it relates to an issue like the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that I was so passionate about. But generally, it's just really going to be about focusing on people and focusing on the people that are working hard to make a difference in this community. One of the reasons why, and Kevin, I'll come back to you now. I represented Kevin Felsher from District 117, happens to be my representative. We met one time, the best we can tell, at a reception up in Jackson that had to do with the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund and your coalition, but the Outdoors Coalition. But I wanted to have a visit with him because I'm impressed with the amount of energy that he puts into the community. I think, again, I've mentioned to him off the air that some people talk a big game, but then they're not really doing their reps. In other words, they're not really engaged in the community in a way that they can really understand what's happening. The more in the trenches you get, the more you're going to learn about what's going on in the community. And I was impressed that Kevin has really been spending a lot of time in that regard, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. But Kevin, you went to the University of Southern Mississippi. You went to Biloxi High. You've got a couple of kids. You go to Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church, which we attend from time to time. Tell me a little bit about your early life.
Sure. Well, I grew up. I was born and sort of raised early on the Point in Biloxi on Oak Street and Hoxie Street. And then my mother, single mom, moved to the west side of town, and we stayed in Boulevard Manor housing. And kind of made a swap. We'd go from the West End to the East End, and we'd hit the Boys and Girls Club on the East End and spend a lot of time there after school and just try to stay out of trouble. And then we come back on the West End, and there used to be a West Biloxi Community Center, and we go play basketball there. The key back then was just staying busy and staying out of trouble for us, because there was definitely a lot of trouble to get into. So that's kind of how I was raised.
Yeah. Well, yes, I married Ann Bohanovich, so I married into the Point clique, with Peter and Mark and Lisa and Ann, and terrific family. Her dad was Pete. Her mom is Miss Annette. You probably know them all, but I loved marrying into that family. As I've talked many times on the show, this mix between the French community, her father being a Melanson, and then of course her dad's side of the family being second generation Yugoslavian or Croatians, Bohanoviches. It's been cool to see the mix of cultures. So I have a really good understanding of where you came from. Alan Picard is my brother-in-law, so I'm sure you know all those families. But you learn a lot about the core culture of Biloxi when you grow up in that part of the city, don't you?
Absolutely. Just the different cultures. And I was born in 75. So as I was growing up, the Vietnamese community started integrating in, and that was a nice thing. Just all the melting pot of cultures is something that you don't get everywhere. And I've always had a firm appreciation for it, whether it be the foods or just the different conversations you can have. It's just been a tremendous place to grow up. I've not visited everywhere or anywhere close to it, but I can tell you Biloxi is absolutely one of the more interesting places if you immerse yourself into it that you can visit.
So you're currently a broker associate with Caldwell Banker. Did you, Alfonso, by the way, commercial realty? Mm-hmm. Did you always know that you wanted to get into real estate, or did you kind of kick some tires along the way and then eventually decide that real estate was for you?
I pretty much knew. I'd done an internship in criminal justice with Gulfport Police Department, and kind of felt that out a little bit, and then got my real estate broker's license. And I went with Carlene Alfonso pretty much right away, and I've never left. I think that's been like 16 years ago. She's just phenomenal to work with. It's a great company, and I love helping people, and you can do that in real estate. And you can make a little money with it, so it's a win-win.
I recognize that we don't have the time to list all of the community activities that you're involved with, but many of them, as I look down the list, the Heart Association, I chaired the Heart Walk one year, and I see others that I had involvement in along the way. But what drives you? What makes you so confident that you have to be involved in the community I don't what's your purpose as it relates to that? Tell me about that.
Sure. I simply believe, and I try to teach my children this: if you don't volunteer and you don't give to others, you're not being a good citizen. And I hate to be critical, but I just believe it. And it doesn't mean you have to do everything, but do something. And for me, it's just been one thing after the other, and I love it. I'll just give you an anecdotal example. I did the Real Men Wear Pink, and from the Real Men Wear Pink, I got into pickleball, and I saw what good pickleball was doing people on a mental health level, on just a pure fitness level. So I became involved with pickleball, and they asked me if I'd be on the advisory board, and I agreed because I see the good works they're doing. One thing kind of leads to another sometimes. And then there's other things like Crime Stoppers that I've been involved with for like 14 years that I just love. I know the good work that Mississippi Coast Crime Stoppers and Lori Massey's doing, so I've stayed on board with that. I won't leave unless they ask me to, as long as I can be a part.
And you've immersed yourself in a volunteer role around the Mental Health Association of South Mississippi. What made that such an important part of what you wanted to do?
Well, Ricky, as you asked me before, where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about that. Well, my mother, single mother, suffered from mental illness from the time that I can remember. And I just remember that disease robbing her of kind of a lot of her life. And, it kind of robbed my brother and I of a mom. So I said to myself, if I'm ever in a position to help others on that front, that I would. And so I've been blessed. One thing I considered before I agreed to run was, how could I impact the mental health community? Well, I'm pleased to say we've advocated for funding. We've gotten a lot of funding for the state mental health Department of Mental Health Director Bailey. But above and beyond that, we've got some good things working with Pine Belt and our supervisors with the Harrison County Diversion Center. This is something that's been talked about since I can remember. Hopefully we can make that come to fruition. We just secured funding for that. We're working on a mental health diversion court. So my passion for mental health, to answer your question directly, stems from what I watched my mother go through, and through being around her, watching so many others afflicted with mental illness and what they have to deal with, what their friends have to deal with, their coworkers, their family. It affects everyone almost every day. It's a roller coaster. So if we can help these folks who sometimes can't help themselves, that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Well, I appreciate you sharing where that important part of what you do in the community comes from. And I know, it represents, it's what Robin Roberts always said, make your mess your passion, and maybe at one point in your life you had a mess, but you're making it your passion. You're flipping the script on it, so to speak. You're making the most challenging times of your life something that's now positive, where you can use your volunteerism, your role as a representative to really make a difference. And by the way, you were, and I want to congratulate you. You were awarded the Annette Humanitarian Award this year for your work with mental health. And I know that award doesn't just come just because someone might have voted yes on a bill or something. You have to work your tail off in the community to get that kind of recognition. So congratulations. I know it means a lot to you. I wonder, I bet it means a lot to you to get the recognition. You're probably not looking for the recognition, actually. You're just doing what you do. How did you view getting that award?
Well, I'll tell you, I was on spring break with my family, and got a call from Kay Denault, director of the Mental Health Association of South Mississippi, and she told me the news, and I was floored and humbled. I'm not looking for the recognition, but it is awesome to get that call. I won't lie about that. It was awesome to get that call, and I'm proud to carry that banner, and I hope, in some way I can inspire someone else to do the same.
When I started the leadership awards at the Sun Herald, which are now the One Coast Awards, what I said about it, and I say this to you, and I think it's the same thing, that certainly the recognition is great, and it is a recognition of hard work. But what's great, what I think is even greater about it is it's the opportunity to sort of hold you up as an example, so that others who may want to give and may want to make a commitment to the community, that they can see what you did to receive that award and be inspired by it, and then go aspire to do it themselves. And hopefully that's what comes from it. Because I say this all the time, that one of the great things about coastal Mississippi is we're incredibly resilient. We have 1,000 points of light. We've got all these organizations that are working together, but then we have these people that are working to fill the gaps, et cetera. And we're lucky in that we have people like you that are willing to do your share, but we need more like you. Hey, listen, Kevin, we're going to continue to talk in the future. I look forward to staying in touch with you. And when you got a big issue that you want to talk more about, let me know, and we'll get back together again. But we're out of time for today.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Ricky.
It's been a real pleasure. This has been Kevin Felsher from the House of Representatives, District 117 here in coastal Mississippi. I tell you what, we're gonna go to break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. See you after this break.